Welcome to this video essay on contemplative practice in Martinism with me, Chuck Dunning. I've developed this presentation for new Martinists, or those who have already been initiated for some time, but have yet to give much attention to contemplative practice. Over 35 years ago, I began formal contemplative studies and practice with my first esoteric teacher, and it became a consistent element not only in my personal life, but also in my career in mental health and higher education. It was the recognition of Martinism as a contemplative mystical tradition that drew me to it more than 2 decades ago. After years of being deeply involved in the complex inner work of Hermetic Kabbalah and psycho-spiritual alchemy, I had found such methods indispensably worthwhile, but they also eventually seemed to point me towards something different. It was in my openness to a next step that I became deeply moved by these words of Saint Martin. Quote, "The only initiation which I preach and seek with all the ardor of my soul is that by which we may enter into the heart of God." End quote. I was impressed that after having faithfully toiled at the complex spiritual work of the Louis-Claude, Saint Martin sought a more direct way of communing with and serving God. In other words, I saw in him a kindred spirit and a role model for the next phase of my own journey. Surely there are some of you listening to this presentation who can relate to that experience. I found that the way of the heart nurtured an intimate relationship with the divine that is signified for me by the single word love. And because I had also come to know the divine was not only within me, but also in every soul, that love naturally deepened my love for human beings, individually and collectively. As Saint Martin said, quote, "For our personal advancement in virtue and truth, one quality is sufficient, namely love. To advance our fellows, there must be two, love and intelligence. To accomplish the work of man, there must be three, love, intelligence, and activity. But love is ever the base and the fount in chief." End quote. In short, I had come to a contemplative realization of the profound wisdom in the greatest commandments communicated by the Master Yeshua, to love God with all that we are and to love others as ourselves. These are really just different aspects of one love, which John the Evangelist says is God, and with whom we are united when we love. Now let's consider what we mean by contemplation. Intentional attention is a very short way of describing it. In everyday use, the word contemplation speaks of carefully attending to something to achieve greater comprehension of it. That meaning is relevant for us, but there are deeper potentials in contemplation than what we can realize through our typical mental activities. Consider these words from Saint Martin. Quote, "It is vain that we pretend to arrive at the fullness of truth by reasoning. By this way we reach only rational truth. Still, it is infinitely precious and full of resources against the assaults of false philosophy." End quote. This is not a statement of anti-intellectualism. He acknowledges that our reason is very valuable, and we each have a duty to develop it as fully as possible. But he is also certain that reason is not the pinnacle of the soul's faculties or potentials. The mind needs insight and inspiration to guide it and hard-won experience to transform it. There are many different methods of shifting our state of consciousness beyond our ordinary ways of thinking to maximize our potentials for receiving insight and inspiration. These methods are all different forms of intentional attention, and they include various kinds of prayer, ritual, energy work, reflection, meditation, dialogue with others, mindfulness, and study. Sometimes these practices help us better understand the concepts and symbols passed down through our ritual and literature. More importantly, contemplative methods assist us in clearly seeing and carefully adjusting our inner lives, the intricate and subtle dynamics of our psyches or souls. In this regard, contemplative practice is often rightly called inner work, and this kind of work is obviously relevant to the processes of regeneration and reintegration. It facilitates the reconnecting and reharmonizing of different aspects of the soul with each other and with the divine light, life, and love that is the source of our best insights, inspirations, and healing. As the previous quote by Saint Martin reveals, he, like our tradition's other great mystics, understood that Christian mystical contemplation stretches beyond the mental and emotional experiences arising in many forms of meditation. It abides in each soul's sanctum sanctorum, its holy of holies. In this deep chamber of contemplation, we may be graced with the revelation of what Saint Martin calls our, quote, inseparable link with unity, end quote. The divine oneness in which we live and move and have our being. Note that I have used the words grace and revelation. This is because we cannot come to the fullest communion with unity simply by the force of our own personal wills. Because to assert personal will is to assert our separateness. Only unity itself can transform separateness into oneness. And so we can only humbly and quietly open our hearts and minds to receive that supreme gift. The Order Martinist's fourth Grand Master, the martyr Constant Chevillon, had profound knowledge about this deep level of contemplation and its significance to the process of initiation, regeneration, and reintegration. In his essay, The Law of Silence, he very eloquently states, quote, "The law of silence is at the origin of all real initiations. Let's hold on to this driving principle from now on. Initiatic instruction presents itself and is received in the silence of all beings, establishes itself in meditation, and bears its fruit in the most secret folds of the pacified mind. Silence is the crucible in which our reason and our will are subjected to the living fire of nature and her sublime creator. Then our life will appear like a synchronized vibration in the universal harmony of the cosmos." End quote. Saint Martin, Chevillon, and others assert the vital role contemplative practice should play in the life of every Martinist and in our gatherings. For now, let's look more carefully at just 4 kinds of contemplative practice fitting for our tradition. They are devotional ritual, cataphatic prayer, apophatic prayer, and energy work. Devotional ritual is performing an organized set of actions, such as putting on regalia, interacting with an altar, lighting candles, burning incense, saying prayers, chanting, singing, playing music, and making symbolic movements to express your devotion to God, the Martinist tradition, the inner work of reintegration, and so on. Such a practice can make use of rituals that are already established by tradition, such as approaching a shrine or altar in one's home and there praying the rosary. It can also be meaningful for individuals to create their own rituals. Cataphatic prayer is speaking to God, aloud or mentally, whether with prayers that are standardized or extemporaneous. The Greek root word phatic means speech, and the prefix kata is an intensifier, adding emphasis to the role or importance of speech in this kind of prayer. This is obviously the most common form of prayer, and Saint Martin composed a set of 10 such prayers for his own devotional practice. Now, apophatic literally means other than speech. Apophatic prayer honors the ineffable transcendence of God by not speaking aloud or mentally, but resting in stillness and quietness, such as in the prayer of silence or centering prayer. This kind of prayer seeks to open one's soul to the most mystical depths of contemplation spoken of by Chevillon and Saint Martin. Energy work involves using breathing techniques, visualization, and other skills to amplify, integrate, and focus the energies of body, mind, and spirit. This sort of work is also sometimes referred to as inner alchemy or psycho-spiritual alchemy. An example of energy work in Orthodox Christianity is hesychasm, which involves a body posture, coordinating recitation of the Jesus prayer with the breath and heartbeat, and the use of prayer beads, and synchronizing all of that with the movement of attention through specific parts of the body. Having now looked at 4 important kinds of contemplative practice, we should also note that even practices can become distractions and interfere with our desire for regeneration and reintegration. Spiritual practices and unusual experiences that can happen within them can, after all, become subject to the same egoic grasping as anything else. There is a syndrome, sometimes referred to as spiritual materialism, in which one can take great satisfaction in accumulating practices and experiences as if they are like the titles, lapel pins, medals, and certificates that can be so attractive in our hunger for respect and prestige. In Martinism, we prayerfully strive to remain mindful of the potential for such temptations and seek to avoid their consequent pitfalls. So, with a watchful eye on the ego, we're ready for next steps in laying a foundation for contemplative practice. First, if prayer isn't already an everyday part of your life, then please make it so. Look for routine moments in which prayer can be easily inserted, like immediately upon waking, at meal times, and before sleep. Feel free to use prayers that are already written or use your own words to express your love for God and others and your desire for regeneration and reintegration. Also, allow at least a few minutes for communing with the mysterious presence of God in silence and stillness. Second, consider setting up a shrine or altar in your home where a short ritual can be a meaningful entry into at least one period of prayer and meditation each day. You might find it best to start with something small and simple, perhaps reflecting part of a Martinist ritual you have witnessed. Something as uncomplicated as lighting a candle, bowing, and whispering your mystical name can be a very effective opening for prayer. As is noted in the ritual and literature of Martinism, anyone who walks this path will meet with resistance, both internally and externally. Some of this resistance will be in the form of temptation to not follow through with your work. Some will be in discovering unpleasant things about yourself, your relationships, and society. You may become aware of deeply hidden fears, doubts, and vices. If that sounds a little daunting to you, then please don't worry. Take courage in the fact that these are all common trials on the way of the heart, and that you are not alone in working through them. In fact, such challenges are necessary. As Saint Martin says, quote, "Never persuade yourself that you possess wisdom in virtue of mere memory or mere mental culture. Wisdom is like a mother's love, which makes itself felt only after the labors and pains of childbirth." End quote. Many others have gone this way before you and are doing so now. And your experience can prepare you to be helpful to others who are following in the chain of initiation. The very reason for this tradition's existence is to lovingly support each other as well as possible. Always remember that you are not alone. In closing, I hope you feel encouraged by the promises of contemplatively diving into the mystical depths of Martinism and your own soul. May we all, as individuals and together in our gatherings, feel the holy desire of our aspirations, glowing as it does in these words of Saint Martin. Quote, "Believe not that the joys of the soul are an illusion, and that the goods we acquire in this life are lost utterly. If it has loved goodness and has at times experienced the secret delights of virtue, it will partake of them with increasing rapture. It has known here below the ravishments caused by the contemplation of things which transcend it." End quote. Thank you for joining me in this consideration of contemplation in Martinism. I wish you more light, life, and love.